This podcast may contain explicit language. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan. Where are these fucking frogs coming from?
Well, that's quite an introduction for the evening, but let's get to our guest. We also welcome our newest celebrity guest, a film producer from LA. Please welcome in Ralph Esparza.
Thank you.
Good to have you. First time on the show. How are we feeling?
I'm feeling great. I was thinking about this all day, actually. Pretty pumped up to speak about the film we're going to speak about. So, pretty excited.
Excellent. And as I understand it, it's one of your favorites.
It is. Top 5, maybe top 3.
Okay, excellent. So, we also welcome in another new celebrity guest, a film critic and reviewer from the UK. Please welcome in Michael Willoughby.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Thank you for being here. First time for you as well.
Oh, I'm excited. This is a movie that I had only seen once, in all honesty, and that was part of the attraction for me tonight to cover this one, was because I saw it a long time ago, and I've just finished a rewatch, and let's just say 20 years difference between seeing them is a big difference in the movie itself for me. So I can't wait to get into this.
Movies do tend to change for me with age. You know, whether I thought better of them when I was younger or I think better of them now, you know, they do have a tendency to definitely change over time. But since you are both first-time guests on the show this evening, you are both subject to our new guest questions. So first up, Ralph, let's pose this one first to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and why you love movies. Okay,
so I will start with why I love movies. For me, movies were my babysitter growing up. Let's put it that way. So growing up in a single parent household, my older sisters had grown up, left the home. It was just me and Mom. During summer vacation, Mom would be at work. I'd be at home all day alone. So instead, she'd give me some money to go to the neighborhood cinema. I would sit there from opening, which was about maybe 11 a.m., till closing, which was like maybe 8 or 9. And I would sit there and watch, let's say it was a double feature, Jaws and Rocky, going way back. They would re-release films and play them together. I'd sit there and watch Jaws twice, and I would watch Rocky twice. I mean, I had nothing else to do. Remember, this was before the internet, cell phones, video games, nothing was around. So I got sucked into whatever I was watching, and it changed my life. I was probably 12 or 13 years old at the time, and I would sneak a tape recorder into the theater, which I probably one of the first bootleggers around, but I would sneak a tape recorder into the theater, and I would take a couple of blank cassettes in and record Jaws or whatever I was watching, and I would go home and listen to it again at night. You know, so I just couldn't get enough of it. So movies just changed my life. For me, it was an escape from whatever was going on outside in the world. And it was my safe comfort zone to sit in that cinema with popcorn, a soda, and Roy Scheider up on the screen blowing up a shark, you know? So it doesn't get better than that. So I've always had a passion for films. I actually worked for a independent director and producer and screenwriter back in the early 90s. I answered an ad one day in a newspaper in Hollywood back in the day before internet was around, and went in. They hired 20 interns to work on this independent film. A couple weeks later, they called everybody in one at a time and let everybody go. I was the last guy to go in, and they actually said, "We want you to run the office. We want to hire you as assistant to the director on this film." I'm like, what? So that's where it began for me. And honestly, I would have done that job. I would have done it for free, you know, but to get paid for it was even icing on the cake at that point. So did that. Worked on a couple of great films with great talent. Cassell, Fairuza Balk, Louise Fletcher. I mean, it was just an amazing time. And life happened and was going to get married, had a baby on the way. I stepped away from the business, and it was a good 20 years I stepped away. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I got back into it, reestablished all my old connections, and jumped in full force. And now it's just been like a freight train going down the tracks. I have some great projects in development, and I'm just very excited at what's going on right now for me.
Excellent. Very, very cool. So, Michael, same question to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and why you love movies.
So I've been writing about movies for quite a long time, probably more than 15 years now. But most recently, I started a bit of an impromptu online community, which was based around movie ranking. It wasn't anything new. It was, and I'll be absolutely honest, there were some parts that I stole from other, some formats, let's just say, from other podcasts. But all of us here create content. We know that nothing's really ever original, right? Anyway,
certainly not this show.
Well, listen, if you can't beat them. Well, I've been doing for a long time now, for a good few years, been doing kind of weekly spaces in which we have this kind of very eclectic group of people from all over the world, and we do the very basic things like your top 5 action movies, top 5 revenge movies, sci-fi movies. But we've done we've done movies with hats, with shoes. We've done movies which are umami, so one is a bit bitter, one is a bit sweet, one is a bit sad. Some might accuse us of running out of ideas, but I think sometimes in the most creative genres that we've jammed in there, we've gotten some incredible answers. Essentially, it's been just a great big melting pot where people can come and talk about the movies they love and get recommendations off of other people. In terms of why I love movies, everything Ralph said, I was just kind of internally applauding because it was a similar, in some ways, very similar one for me. I would echo everything he said. The other side of things, I think specifically with this movie, this one, I'll give perhaps a bit more of an introspective answer in terms of why I love movies. I think movies and art in general tell us who we are and tell us what the world is and what the world was and what the world could be. And I think that's so relevant to tonight's movie, to Magnolia, because there's a huge part, I think, in one of the storylines, which is all about someone who desperately doesn't want to know who he is. And I think one of the characters has a line which is, it's important. It's important. And I think it is important to know who we are. I think in this day when there is so much out of our control, I think it's good to know who we are and why we love the things we love. So yeah, that's basically my relationship with movies.
Well, I will put you in the hot seat first for our dreaded second question. What is your favorite movie and why?
I'm sure everyone said this to you, which is, it's a horrible question. How dare you?
Yes. Most people have said that. That's why it's the dreaded question.
How dare you? There is a pool. I think everyone has a pool, don't they? Like a top 5, let's say, which is always swirling round and always interchangeable. Yep. Tonight, I'm going to go with. It is Treasure Planet. It is Treasure Planet. It is Treasure Planet.
Okay.
It's my comfort movie. It's a father-son movie. Listen, I've got much better answers for you, which are more sophisticated, but they are depressing as well. So tonight, you're getting Treasure Planet. Treasure Planet is my favorite movie.
All right. And we move to you, Ralph. Your turn. What is your favorite movie and why?
Yeah, it's a horrible question. It depends what day of the week you're asking me. I mean, I feel like sometimes it changes, now and then, but it always comes back to one movie. And I've already referenced it once. My coffee cup says it all. Jaws. Jaws for me, as a kid watching that at 10, 11 years old, just blew me away. All right. Before CGI was around, anything, it just blew me out of the water. No pun intended. It was just changed my life, man. First Christmas gift I asked Santa for was John Williams' film score for the movie, and I remember finding that under the Christmas tree Christmas morning. I didn't care about what else was under that tree. I just wanted that soundtrack, and I played it over and over. And I still have that same album, from when I was a kid. So Jaws, totally.
One of the greatest film scores ever. So you can't go wrong there. 2 notes. 2 notes.
Yeah.
All right. So finally, Ralph, last question. What makes a good movie for you?
Once again, I need to forget about what's going on outside of the theater, right? I think Roger Ebert did an interview once where he kind of mentioned something like this, and I related to it so much. I want to sit in that theater. I don't want to remember where I parked the car, what bills I have to pay when I get out of the theater. I want to just get into the story and forget about everything else. And I want to be moved. For me, if a movie makes me laugh, cry, or think about things that I normally wouldn't think about on a normal day, man, that's a great freaking movie. You know what I'm saying? So for me, if a movie can pull those off, that's a good movie for me. And Magnolia, of course, did that for me.
Michael, same question to you. What makes a good movie for you?
I'm going to sound so awful here, but I'm going to lean on Ralph's answer because it's exactly what I had written down is total immersion. I think total immersion for me, as Ralph said, I think a lot of the time, as I've gotten older and gotten more used to movies and content and storylines and narratives, the trick for me is usually the movie has to get out of its own way or get out of your way in terms of just letting you immerse. So it needs to not do the things which, as we all do when we watch movies, that take you out of them. And sometimes that's a performance. Sometimes it's a design choice. It could be anything. That I think it's more, I think a lot of the time people talk about directors as being these great masters of art. And yes, of course they are in many ways, but sometimes it's really just about doing it without making mistakes, almost like a chef, almost just do it properly and it will be good. But there's attention to detail. I think, I'll leave it there. Sorry, Ralph. Again, I'm just biting all of your answers.
That's okay. I love it.
Well, thank you both for submitting to those questions. I hope they weren't too terrible, other than the second one, apparently, but that's okay. But I know you're both chomping at the bit to talk about tonight's film. So tonight, for our 241st episode, we revisit the 1999 film Magnolia for its 25th anniversary. Written and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. Music by Jon Brion. Starring Jeremy Blackman as Stanley Spector. Tom Cruise as Frank T.J. Mackey, Melinda Dillon as Rose Gator, April Grace as Guinevere, Luis Guzman as Luis, Philip Baker Hall as Jimmy Gator, Philip Seymour Hoffman as Phil Pharma, Ricky Jay as Burt Ramsey, William H. Macy as Quiz Kid Donnie Smith, Alfred Molina as Solomon, Julianne Moore as Linda Partridge, Michael Murphy as Alan Kligman, Esquire, John C. Reilly as Jim Curring, Jason Robards as Earl Partridge, and Melora Walters as Claudia Wilson Gator. Recognition for this movie? Magnolia was released on December 17th, 1999. On a budget of $37 million, it would gross roughly $48.5 million worldwide, finishing as the number 64 film at the worldwide box office for 1999. For context's sake, Dad, what do you think finished just ahead of it? It may not even be a film that you're familiar with.
Well, okay, well then it'll be pure speculation. I'll just make up something and throw it out since it's one I'm not familiar with. I
said you might not be familiar with.
Okay, well, okay.
It's actually a kind of teen favorite of mine. 10 Things I Hate About You.
I recognize the name, but I know I haven't seen it.
Okay, so just for the sake of rounding out the depth of 1999 that we did not cover this year, The Insider, Varsity Blues, Mickey Blue Eyes, For the Love of the Game, Those are all like just roughly around it. Never Been Kissed was number 49. The Hurricane, which was Denzel Washington, was 53. Cider House Rules at 47. Galaxy Quest at 45. And one of your all-time favorites, Dad, at number 44, Deuce Bigalow, Male Gigolo.
The heart loves what it loves, doesn't it?
Mickey Blue Eyes was funny.
Yeah, I know that was pretty good, but Rob Schneider should be like banned from Hollywood after that.
I would go.
They had a sequel.
I would go as far as to say 10 Things I Hate About You is another one in my list of perhaps favorite movies as well, as an absolute favorite.
I know the producer on that one, Andrew Lazar. It's crazy. Small World.
Going back to Deuce Bigalow, they had a sequel. Yes. Last time I had diarrhea, I had a sequel too, and they were both shitting in the toilet.
Wow. Okay. Off to a rousing start.
If you ever do a show on Deuce Bigalow, please invite me back for that one.
We may just do that now. Just to make my dad sit through it. All right. Critics were a bit mixed at the time, with many, though, finding the film among the year's best. Magnolia would receive 3 Oscar nominations for, does anyone know?
Best actor, or best actor, supporting actor.
Best supporting actor for whom?
Best Tom Cruise.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Screenplay. For
Screenplay, yeah.
Yep, original screenplay for P.T. Anderson.
Score, too, wasn't it?
Editing?
Original song for Aimee Mann.
Oh, Aimee.
Okay.
In an interview, Ingmar Bergman mentioned Magnolia as an example of the strength of American cinema. Roger Ebert included this work in his great movies list in November 2008, saying, "As an act of filmmaking, it draws us in and doesn't let go." Total Film magazine placed it at number 4 in their list of the 50 best movies in Total Film's lifetime as a magazine. In 2008, it was named the 89th greatest movie of all time by Empire magazine, and its issue of the 500 greatest movies of all time. It received 8 votes, 5 from critics and 3 from directors, in the 2012 Sight and Sound polls. Following the film's release, Anderson said, "I really feel that Magnolia is, for better or worse, the best movie I'll ever make." Later, he came to consider it overlong. When asked in a subsequent interview what he would tell himself to do if he could go back and if he reshot the film, his response was, "Chill the fuck out and cut 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Man.
Magnolia currently holds an 82% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 78 score on Metacritic, and a 4.2 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So as we begin each week, Dad, what is your relationship to this film?
I have none. This is the first time I'd seen it.
I strategically put this on the list so that you and I would be forced to watch it. We have yet to discuss a single Paul Thomas Anderson movie on the show to this point. So this is the first one. We're crossing that barrier. I know he is well renowned among like cinemaphiles. See, now you even have me doing it. Cinephiles. Damn it. And critics and real industry people. Like he is, when they talk about the comedian's comedian, to me, it sounds like Paul Thomas Anderson is the director's director. And I've never quite gotten to a movie of his. I realized today, out of, I think, his 9 feature films, I've now seen 6. There are 3 yet that I haven't yet gotten to. But this is the first one that I really felt like it was accessible to me for the first time. I know that everybody holds There Will Be Blood as this like towering giant of the century. One of the great all-time films, not only of that decade, but of multiple decades over. For me, I felt nothing in that film. And I know I have to go back and rewatch it, but the same thing for Phantom Thread. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't really get into it. Licorice Pizza kind of left me quite wanting on that one. I actually responded quite well, at least to the first half of Inherent Vice, but even that one got to be a little bit like overlong, and the longer it went on, it just got more and more complicated. And even the one that most people hold up as like their seminal favorite, Boogie Nights, I couldn't quite understand what exactly it was about his films that I was supposed to be trying to understand. This is the first one where I felt like a true connection, somewhat of an emotional response to what I was seeing on screen. And so
Nice.
if there's one of the 6 that I've seen to this point that I would really hold up, this is the one so far that I would say is my favorite of the 6 that I've seen so far. For reference sake, before anybody out in the ether asks, the 3 that I have yet to see are Hard 8, which is his first one. I haven't seen Punch Drunk Love, and I haven't seen The Master. But otherwise, I've gotten everything else.
And I think Punch Drunk Love is the one from that list, which I think perhaps that may be an easier one for you to connect with as well. I think the two are quite close together.
Okay.
But I fully echo everything you say. I got a little bit more from Phantom Thread than I did from all of the others, but otherwise I'd say the same. There Will Be Blood leaves me very, very cold, and like usually needing to go and have a shower afterwards. And I completely echo everything on Inherent Vice. It just spirals out into this kind of, where are we? Why? Okay. All right. With Paul Thomas Anderson movies, you ever heard that expression? It's not necessarily about getting from point A to point B, like getting to the end. It has to be been worth the journey. And I think perhaps that may be one of the things that perhaps gets in the way of, I think, perhaps his art and audiences, is he doesn't make it easy for you sometimes.
So the one thing that supposedly is like the Rosetta Stone to understanding his movies is most of it has to do with family, and either the family we choose, the family we keep, the family trauma that we have. But all of his films have that through line through them somehow. And I guess I hadn't seen it quite that way until very recently.
This was a very personal film for him because I believe his dad was dying of cancer or had died of cancer. So the Jason Robards character really hit home. Going back to There Will Be Blood really quick, I just saw that for the first time maybe 6 months ago.
Okay.
And like you said, I found myself trying to like it, sitting there watching it. Okay, I want to like this film because it's Paul Thomas Anderson, but I'm not liking it. You know, I like Daniel Day's performance, but for me, it was like, I was wanting something like, not Magnolia, different story, of course, but you know, I needed it to be more than what it was. So I agree with your assessment of There Will Be Blood 100%. I have not seen Punch Drunk Love, by the way, so I'm going to do that.
I think now that I've realized I'm so close to seeing his entire filmography, I might just try and cross out the last 3 on my own here pretty quickly, but we don't have those coming up on the show anytime soon. I don't know. That may be something for personal exploration.
You will be home this weekend, so.
That is true. I don't know how much you're going to want to sit through all 3 of those movies, but.
Well, we could at least do one. And her
Fair.
Mother's gone because.
She is officially going to be gone?
Well, as far as I know, it's still gone. She's still gone. You know, she said, do you want me to watch this with you? And I said, well, let's put it this way. This is the same director who did Licorice Pizza. No, I have no interest in watching that.
Oh, she's not home. You need to watch Deuce Bigelow, European Gigolo. Right?
No, watch Boogie Nights.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's another one I probably have to give another try to, but I watched it thinking that this was going to be like one of these things that would sweep me off my feet, and I felt nothing because I'm like, I don't connect with any of these people. I don't understand why I'm supposed to care about them, but I don't know. That's for another pod in the future. But with Magnolia, what is the movie about?
For me, I think it's, man, there's a lot of answers for that question. You know, it's about forgiveness, right? It's about, you know, forgiving yourself, forgiving others. There's a line in there about our past, right? Forgetting about our past, but our past doesn't forget about us, that whole thing. We're all connected in some way, shape, or form, right? I mean, we're not in the same state, obviously, or even same country. I think you're in the UK, right? So, but we're all connected in some crazy way through things that happen, right? I mean, just like in Magnolia, you know, when I saw it again for probably the 4th time a couple weeks ago, and I I never noticed that on the street when they're driving, the street is Magnolia. And I'm like, wow, I never caught that before. It's just something small like that. It's a street in San Fernando Valley out here, but they're all crossing paths. And it reminded me of, man, we're all connected. And for me, that's what it was. We all experience these things that these people are going through in one shape or form. For me, as a young lad, my father left my mother and me and my sisters. So for me, the whole Jason Robards, Tom Cruise stuff, man, talk about, heavy stuff for me. That's what really pulled me in there and blew me away and literally had me sobbing like a baby. But yeah, that's for me. It's about forgiveness and how we're all connected in one way or another.
And I would agree with a lot of that sentiment. I think the one thing you didn't mention in there that I really had in my interpretation was trauma. Shared trauma.
Yep.
But yeah, a lot of this has to do with, frankly, the way that we interact with our parents and the trauma, either earned or unearned, that parents can have, intentional or unintentional, on their children. And you see that through multiple different stories. So Donnie Smith and Stanley are basically the same kid, but just separated by a generation. Whereas basically Tom Cruise and, is it Malora Walters? Claudia. They're basically going through a similar thing together. You have the producer and the host of the same show, but their dads are dying of cancer and they have this really difficult relationship with them due to something that they did to them. So a lot of the people in this, it's a give and take. It's not only trying to deal with forgiving them, but forgiving yourself for not forgiving them up to that point. There's a lot of need for grace in the film. And I think that, to me, as heavy as the film can be, as intense as it can be, was what really connected with me. And no, it was not my personal childhood traumas, Dad. I know you were going to go there.
I think before Michael jumps in, I think for all of us, when we go see a movie, each of us brings our own personal experiences to the theater, right? So I might see Magnolia and just cry in certain areas where it might not even nudge you emotionally, right? So I think, that's when you go see a movie, people forget that we all take our past with us into that theater and we watch a movie, yes, in the same room, but we're seeing it through different eyes. And I think that's, for me, that's why I related so much to Magnolia. It was just all the different storylines. I really could relate to many of them, to be honest with you.
I'd completely agree. I think the eyes that I first watched this through in my early 20s, I watched it and all I could remember, literally before agreeing to come on and do this podcast with you guys, was, what can I remember about Magnolia? I can remember Tom Cruise by the bedside, and I remember it raining at the end. I remembered that bit. And I think after some introspection, I think the reason being is because I was in my early 20s. I don't think I'd had a lot of life right then to actually bring to this movie. Watching it now, 20-something years later, it's a very different movie. In terms of my career, since then, I've had children and partners, and I've lost people, and I've been working recently with people with dementia in the last stages of their life. I work in a residence care home. So the last few months have actually, in terms of the run up to this movie, have been incredibly relevant in terms of. I completely agree with the sentiment that this is about forgiveness, 100%. I think it's also about hope in some ways. Thomas, what about what you were saying in terms of the weights that everyone carries with them, the trauma, the pain, and then what they do with it, or what they choose to do with that pain. But the third word I would choose to associate with this movie is regret. And I think those three are all kind of they're all driving each other. And it's been the scenes with, as Ralph said, with Earl in the dying bed. And I do love the movie does have a bit of fun with itself. even in the script, which is a bit indulgent in places. But I do love the bit where it's almost kind of breaking the fourth wall and says, "Oh, this is so boring. The dying man in the bed with the dying wish." Like, it's quite. I love that it took a little moment to be funny there. However, I think if you really dig down to the heart of this, I think it comes down to human beings when they face the end, when they know that the death is coming around the corner. What are the only things that they think about? What are the most important things? And the most important things in terms of their regrets are the people that they've hurt and the pain they've caused other people. So if there is a meaning to life, then it's literally just that, isn't it? Just try not to hurt people that you love, pretty much. So yeah, yeah, as I said at the beginning, this didn't hit home for me originally. But I knew it was great when I watched it, but I didn't have enough life experience to appreciate it. I think that's very different now.
So, Dad, you messaged me while you were watching the film, I believe on Sunday, and you
Yes.
said you were undecided yet on whether or not you liked or disliked the film. Did you make a decision?
Yes.
Would you like to share it?
Sure. All right.
I mean, this is a podcast.
Yes, I like the film. And what I'm going to go to is this is my thought process. I watched the film in two parts. I watched it on Sunday and I finished it on Monday. Simply because it was 3 hours, and with my schedule, trying to block off 3 hours was difficult. And when I originally thought about it, I'm thinking, oh, this is about randomness and it's about pain and holding grudges and all this. Okay. Then I stopped and I thought about it some more. Then I added in, it's also about loneliness, and it's about death being, you can talk about how he died with his family around him. You die alone. Even if people are there, they cannot experience the death. Okay. They cannot experience what you're going through. They're there for their own comfort, not for yours. And so there's a loneliness that comes into play in there. Okay.
Oh, that's heavy.
Wow. Give me a tissue.
Keep
Yeah,
going.
that's
yes.
That's really good.
Okay. Now add to that what I thought about, even just writing up my notes for today, and then thinking about it more while I was sitting in a school board meeting, because I'm on the school board, and being
You did this
bored.
while
Yes, because I was bored about what some of the things they were talking about, the education report card, which means nothing. I'm thinking about this, and it dawned on me what this really is. The frogs are about not just, that's the turning point. It's not just regret or forgiveness. It's acceptance and understanding. And I think back in my own situation with my dad, who had a very similar experience to you, Ralph. He had a very traumatic childhood, and the one place that he enjoyed his life was sitting in the movie theaters on Saturdays, because that was in the late 40s, and he, as a child, and the whole experience, the cartoons, the news reels, the shorts, the double features, etc. That was his happy place. And I remember the time when I realized, because there was a certain part of me that regretted, my dad was not the most emotional and connected person to me or to my sister. But I came to the realization he did the best he could, because he was also dealing with the trauma and demons of his own life and his own experiences as a child. And when I came to that understanding, that revelation that happened later in my life when I was in my 30s, I came to accept him for what he was and understand that I could have a relationship and have a fondness for him and an understanding of where he was that was not there. And every aspect of that, think about when the frogs hit, every character had a life-changing event. And for several of them, whether it was Donnie accepting, it was stupid of me to be thinking I could fix my teeth, or whatever it was. They all had a change in their circumstances that was significant. And it's that not just the regret or the loneliness or the pain or the randomness, but it's the acceptance. And once you have that acceptance, you're able to move forward and actually have some ability to control and enjoy your life and the relationships around you better.
That's absolutely amazing. And for me, really quick, so after my dad being out of my life for many, many years, he passed away in 2020, but we were able to rekindle our relationship that last year. And I literally, was in the room when he passed. And so that, like I said, the whole Jason Robart stuff for me is really heavy. And I actually had to dress him and put clothes on him after he passed. So talk about doing the hardest thing you ever did in someone's life. That's about it for me. But man, you hit it right on the head. I seriously, that assessment right there was just, you hit the nail on the freaking head. Almost brought a tear in my eye the way you went through that right now with the frogs and everything. It's amazing.
That combination, and it comes up as a recurring theme throughout the movie, isn't it? And I don't know if we would call it a deus ex machina, because I don't know if that's exactly what it is, but there are continuous references to kind of, force majeure, like Donnie getting hit by lightning. And just, again, Dana, what you just said in terms of that acceptance, that thought process, that coming to that realization is like being struck by lightning. What the fuck am I doing? That feeling of, or just understanding. I love, that's woven in quite beautifully. I didn't really get the lightning connection until you talked about understanding and acceptance. It has a whole new.
Well, I looked up Exodus
8:2.
Was it
8:20? So for reference sake, if you're probably listening to this, you're very well familiar that P.T. Anderson has put Exodus 8:2 throughout this movie in various different ways, basically calling that this was going to be part of it. But the verse itself, but if you refuse to let them go, behold, I will plague all of your country with frogs. But yes,
and that was to me, when I read that, I'm going, oh, what it's basically saying is release the situation.
I mean,
and or I'm going to send you
I don't want to
frogs.
quote Elsa from Frozen, but it's literally let it go, isn't it?
Yes.
You have to let go of your pain and what you're holding on to. Yeah.
The formula I keep espousing to people, and I talk about it to my staff, is we all have events and we all have reactions, and how we react is what ends up becoming the outcome. And if we change how we react to certain events, we're going to have different outcomes. And sometimes we just have to grasp that. Holding on to bitterness doesn't help.
I guess the heart, just in line with that was why it kind of feels like the deathbed scenes with Earl and with Jimmy Gator at the end, for both of them, but for different reasons. You ever feel where like it feels like a problem is too big? It's too big to be solved. How do you solve a lifetime of pain and regret and all the horrible, literally all the shitty things you ever did? How do you fix that when you have perhaps minutes left to live? And that's kind of why I love Philip Seymour Hoffman's character in this, because that's literally his job. That's literally, Phil, can you just can you help me? I mean, also with the dogs and shit and my medication and Linda, we'll get onto Linda, but can you also, just go out and find Frank so that I can die with some peace? God bless Philip Seymour Hoffman, man.
Yes, for sure.
So, Dad, you ready to dig a little further into this movie? Do you have our plot summary ready for us?
I do. Magnolia is a sprawling kaleidoscopic meditation on the interconnectedness of lives and the consequences of human frailty, directed with audacious ambition by Paul Thomas Anderson. Set in the San Fernando Valley. The film weaves together a mosaic of seemingly disparate characters, each grappling with their own wounds, secrets, and regrets. A dying patriarch seeks closure. A nurse becomes a moral anchor. A game show host confronts buried truths. And a motivational speaker teeters on the edge of self-destruction. What unites them is a shared yearning for forgiveness and redemption, underscored by a sequence of events that defy explanation and culminate in a surreal, unforgettable act of grace. Fueled by Jon Brion's evocative score and Aimee Mann's haunting songs, Magnolia is less a story than an emotional storm, one that challenges, overwhelms, and ultimately lingers in the hearts like a plaintive hymn to the mysteries of life.
Thank you. Did you know? The story about the man being killed by a gunshot while falling off a building has for years been used as a hypothetical case in criminal law classes to illustrate causation. And I don't just bring that one up here so that my professor from criminal law that I just maybe finished, hopefully I didn't fail, so I'd have to take it again, may have some ideas for future students, since I won't have to go through it. But if I have to retake the class, I already know the Rosetta Stone. I just have to rewatch Magnolia. So there you go. Did you know? When Paul Thomas Anderson approached George C. Scott about playing the role of Earl Partridge, Scott threw the script across the room saying, "This is the worst fucking thing I've ever read. The language is terrible."
Yeah, says the man who did hardcore years ago.
Yeah, well, and Dr. Strangelove.
Yes.
Did you know? Paul Thomas Anderson wrote the bulk of the script during 2 weeks he spent at William H. Macy's Vermont cabin, afraid to go outside because he'd seen a snake.
At least it wasn't a frog.
I mean, religious overtones there again. Interesting.
Right.
Did you know? Paul Thomas Anderson made a visit to the set of Eyes Wide Shut, where he offered the role of Frank T.J. Mackey to Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise loved Boogie Nights so much he asked Paul Thomas Anderson to consider him for a part in his next film. Cruise, while initially rather terrified at playing such a change in pace, relished the role as it was so completely different from the repressed character he played in Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. Did you know? This is Jason Robards' last feature film. Did you know? Almost every location contains at least one picture or painting of a magnolia. And finally, did you know? The telephone number 877-TAME-HER is shown on the Seduce and Destroy infomercials within the movie. Dialing this number used to give a recording of Tom Cruise giving the Seduce and Destroy pitch.
Wow, I never knew that.
It doesn't work anymore, no. But I think for a time they probably had that up there.
Wow,
Can I go back to just one of the things you said? I didn't know about the Paul Thomas Anderson Eyes Wide Shut Tom Cruise connection. That is so interesting because if anything, that I think the one thing that I take away from this movie is hats off to Tom Cruise because he must have read this script and he went, that is the role I want. And one of the first spaces I ever did with movie ranking wasn't actually movie ranking. It was an interesting question. We called it the Tom Off. Tom Hanks versus Tom Cruise. If you had to get rid of one set of filmographies, which one would you choose? And the thing that kind of most people came out with after about 2-3 hours of talking about this was Tom Cruise takes bigger swings than Tom Hanks. Like Tom Cruise has taken some swings in his filmography. Haven't always paid off, but by God, I'm so glad Paul Thomas Anderson was scared of a snake and then went to go see him on Eyes Wide Shut because, yeah, this is, I think that at the end of the day, when people look back at Tom Cruise for everything that he is in terms of a personality and what he represents as an actor, which is really the reason why he's here. I mean, this is acting. This is acting.
He's a movie star. He literally, to me, is like an old movie star that you hardly get anymore. Kevin Costner, for me, falls into that. He's like old-time Hollywood actor.
Well, that looks like a good spot for our first break. We will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 242nd episode, we revisit yet another film from Season 1 to close out Season 5 with In the Heat of the Night from 1967. Directed by Norman Jewison. Written by Sterling Siliphant. Music by Quincy Jones, starring Sidney Poitier, Rod Steiger, Warren Oates, and Lee Grant. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Before we move much further, let's talk to our guests. And first up, Ralph, where can people find you and what are you working on?
You can find me on Instagram, Ralph_Esparza, IMDb. You can find me there as well. I have a film going into production, pre-production, about April, and we'll go into principal photography in June. It's a horror film, which I know you're not a fan of because you mentioned that. But I optioned the rights to one of the best-selling horror novels of 2023. And got a really good relationship going with the author. He let me have the rights to it, and I had it adapted into a screenplay, which is freaking phenomenal. The author even said the screenplay is better than his book, which you don't hear too often. So we pitched it to a director based at a studio. I can't say yet. And he 3 days later called me and said, I want this. I want to direct it. So that's something that we're going to do 2025. So I'm pretty pumped about that. So I got another production going on that's a little smaller budget that'll probably shoot before that. But the other one is a big one. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. And Michael, what are you working on and where can people find you?
Find me across most platforms. Originally, most of the Skadoosh, which is my online names, at Skadoosh, SKADOOOSCH. That was a name that I picked many years ago without perhaps, maybe you can imagine, without putting too much thought into it. Little did I know that I'd picked it almost kind of subconsciously by Kung Fu Panda, by the way of Kung Fu Panda. But yeah, you can find the movie ranking on YouTube, on Twitter, most recently and a lot more prevalently on Blue Sky. It's not a judgment on people who still use Twitter. Just it's a personal thing for me that I'm trying now to concentrate more on that platform. Just if only the technology would catch up. But yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment. You can catch all of my stuff on YouTube and online. You can find me on Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter. I'd still refuse to call it X. But yeah, that's just me.
That's just fine over here because
yes, fuck Elon. Thank you. Sorry. Just
it's all good. So as far as that goes, I think that we're going to have to migrate over to Blue Sky at some point here, Pop, because his sentiment is one that's shared by a lot of people, frankly. So maybe it's a good idea to at least throw up another platform here in the near future, maybe to start season 6. But
yeah, we can always add a platform.
It's time for everyone's favorite segment. That's right. It's time for Ask Dana Anything. We do not have any listener submissions. And so, unless our guests have some questions for my enigmatic co-host, we will skip this segment and move on. Sorry to put you guys on the spot, but it's okay if
what size waist do you wear in pants? I mean, what? I'm trying to think of a question here to ask. I mean, what are you drinking?
Bourbon.
There you go.
Williams tonight. It changes periodically. I'm a bourbon aficionado, and so
bourbon
varies.
Snob is more proper, but okay.
So,
I have a question for Dana. It's one that we used to play this game in the space called Who to Boot. It's very simple. If I give you 3 actors, the trick is you can only keep one. You're going to have to get rid of 2. So it's which one of these 3. But the the twist is that the two that you lose, every movie that they've ever been in, their entire filmography, would be permanently deleted. So it's not a question of who's the best actor or who has the most awards. It's who's been in the most number of films which you love. Does that make sense? Okay.
Sure.
Robin Williams, Harrison Ford, Denzel Washington.
Glory with Denzel is one of my favorites. That's hard. But Robin with...
You would be losing Hook.
Boy.
You'd lose Mrs. Doubtfire. You would lose
Dead Poet Society.
Good Will Hunting.
I know.
But Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, The Fugitive, which is like a total dad movie.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Air Force One.
The Jack Ryan's.
Get off of
Clear
my
and Present Dangers.
Working Girl, which I like.
So Dana, this is the thing. This is it's really like, I know I had a pop at you guys at the beginning for asking the horrible question. Like, I do way worse stuff on in my spaces. I ask people to rank stuff, which is, I know it's ridiculous and stupid in many ways, but there is some little magic there in terms of when you do think about it.
All right. I love Denzel, but he would be gone. Okay, simply because of the films. Mm-hmm. And at least if I get rid of Robin, I can watch Comic Relief reruns and watch his appearances on the Tonight Show in perpetuity. So
when he was on Inside the Actors Studio was also excellent.
All his stuff with
there's
Billy Connolly as well on Michael Aspel. No, Michael Parkinson. Sorry, over here. That's another one.
Yeah. So I guess that would be where I would go.
Harrison Ford.
Yep. So Harrison Ford.
He's got the goods.
Simply because he's just yes. All right.
All right.
Currently,
American Treasure, Harrison Ford stays.
Currently killing it in.
He has great one-line.
Shrinking as well. If anyone is watching the TV show Shrinking, he's killing it. Absolutely killing it.
All right. So let's get back into the regular show here. We left off at Best Performance. Dad, who do you have down?
I have Paul Thomas Anderson.
We kind of default to the directors, and especially when they're the writers, but I have to say.
Yeah.
I mean, the Cruise, I think, is the easy option. I didn't know that we didn't have to go for actors, and I'm glad that Dana just said the director, because I would go for whoever's operating the cameras in this 3-hour maelstrom of West Wing style walk and talks. Like the amount of scenes which are on a dolly, like the entire time, the camera work is really something. There's a lot of work gone into that, and again, with myself with no experience of actually making films. Ralph, I think, will be able to talk more about that, but it's so dynamic as a movie, and I think because it needs to be, and a lot of that is in the camera work, I feel.
Oh, for sure. There's one scene where it's like a two minutes. I think I timed it 2 minutes and 22 seconds. Steadicam shot when the dad and son are getting out of the car to go into the studio. Camera just follows them the entire way down the hallway. That's an amazing shot right there. Everybody, the timing has to be on 100%. There are plenty of shots like that. The editing for me was amazing. I mean, the cuts, back and forth to each character, boom, 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 as the drama's building. It reminded me of JFK Oliver Stone film where the editing was just freaking amazing. But yeah,
just to jump in again on that, the editing, absolutely. The sometimes it's not just jumping in between storylines. It's doing it while someone's giving a really important speech. When Stanley is giving kind of a monologue to Jimmy Gator, and it's
Yes.
chopping and chopping and chopping whilst he's giving the speech, which is, so there are almost minutes that go by, and then bang, it drops you back into the speech, and that is brave, very, very brave to do, because that thread could break at any stage, and it doesn't. It's incredible.
Yes. So Robert Elswit was the cinematographer, and for if you were going to nominate him, as I thought you were, Dylan Tischner for editor.
Yeah. In regards to cast, I couldn't choose just one and say, like Michael said, everybody would probably say Tom Cruise. But for me, I couldn't choose one because I got something out of every character in the film. They moved me in different ways. Jimmy Gator dying of cancer, that was heavy stuff right there. Coming clean to his wife at the end where he cheated on her. I've cheated on you many times, didn't admit to the molesting, but yeah, no, best performance. Everybody did great for me.
Okay. Best secondary performance. I'm going to give somebody who I know that, especially in a modern sense, is thought of more as a comedic actor, but he definitely has some really good dramatic chops. And I'm going to go with John C. Reilly. I thought he was an unheralded character in this movie. I followed him really well. For somebody that is in kind of a job that I think, especially in a modern sense, the shine is off the apple a little bit more when it comes to police than it used to be, where it was held in such, I would say, a more high esteem. For him to be able to play that credibly, where I didn't think it was pulling punches as to how police behavior normally is. Like, there's some definite things in there where I think on a procedural level, now looking at it from like a legal fashion, going through law school myself, there are some problems with what he's doing, but that doesn't mean I care about his character less. I somehow found some level of connection with everything that he was doing. And by the point where even when he does something I think would be unthinkable, you're on the job and you're hitting on a woman and then you just directly ask her out, you still care about her enough to like go after the fact and try and, I don't know, in essence, save her in a way that she really doesn't want to be. Maybe that's a complicated relationship, but I just found him to be very profound in this role. And I guess I don't understand some of the criticisms of him sometimes as seeming a little dumb. I didn't get that from this movie.
He's not dumb. He is a puppy dog. And I completely agree. He does some very inappropriate and unprofessional things in this movie, but at the same time, it's like they're being done by a puppy. Like, he is harmless. You see, he's the squarest man you've ever met in your life, isn't he? Essentially. But yeah, it's the performance is really something. It really is. I'm so glad you said that because I was watching it going, yeah, this is, I'm not sure about this.
Frankly, I think he's what ties the second half of the movie together for me. I mean, as much as Tom Cruise dominates the first half and probably the ending scene, I think John C. Reilly really holds together that probably about mid to about 90% finished portion of the movie for me.
Yeah, he's lonely, right? He's lonely beyond belief. And so is she, right? She's sleeping around all these guys doing drugs. She's lonely. And they're both like just connecting, right? And he knows, he probably knows she's doing something, comes out of the bathroom, sniffing her nose, and he probably knows what's up, but he kind of just ignores it, I think, because he's so lonely.
It's that open honesty that they kind of then get almost high on themselves, like that spark of being open and honest, right, and knowing, being able, as Earl says, take the shame, take the regret, and turn it into something. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you shouldn't feel those things. Do feel those things, and that's the basis for, as Thomas said, he's the almost kind of the pure heart of the movie in that final movement, and it's because both of them are learning that they don't want to hide, they don't want to lie, they don't want to exaggerate, they just want to be honest with each other and vulnerable, and like, yeah.
Other best secondary performances?
I had sorry, the actress who plays Claudia.
Oh, okay, Melora, I think it's
Walters.
Walters.
Yeah, she was amazing. I would, my blood pressure would go up during those scenes because she was so out of breath and high on coke and just like, and just watching that and with the music in the background, the way the score was, those were intense. 2 or 3 minutes she was on screen every time she popped up.
Jangly. Everything about it in that it makes you feel, like your teeth are on edge. That's hard to do with a physical performance. It's incredible.
I mean, aren't teeth always on an edge? That's
fair point.
The bite. Dad, who did you have?
I had Tom Cruise, but I do have a question about this. What will Tom Cruise's next performance be in jockey shorts?
Was there some padding?
He's had
Do you
two
think
now.
there was any padding going on? And was the padding would that have been part of the character choosing to pad it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I noticed that. Yes.
So here's my question on top of that question. There is no way that it's not some form of padding. But 2, was it contractually obligated?
He was in great shape besides that portion, right? I mean, look at his body. He was ripped. It was amazing.
I understand, but it just brought back Harry Shearer in This Is Spinal Tap. I'm expecting him to pull out the cucumber wrapped in
tinfoil.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm going, no way.
Okay. Ralph, who did you have as best secondary?
This is going to throw you guys for a loop. Not one of the main characters, but Alfred Molina's character.
Okay.
William Macy's boss. It was a quick 5 minutes, whatever it was, but that guy kills it in everything he's in. I love his work. And he was just like, not going to forgive William Macy. Give me the keys, that whole scene. I thought he was pretty cool. Like I said, not a big chunk in the movie, but I love his work. I'm a big fan of him.
Most charismatic? I mean, come on. It's Tom Cruise.
It absolutely is not. It is Henry Gibson sat at that bar giving everybody shit. That man stole that movie for me. The entire movie. He stole everything. Henry Gibson. That is the answer.
Do you want to know what the character's name is, actually? No. I don't think it's ever mentioned in the film. It's Thurston Howell.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I saw that.
Amazing.
So, for those of us who remember him on Laugh-In. Yes.
Henry Gibson, not Thurston Howell.
Yes. So.
All right.
I have somebody else for most charismatic.
Are you going to share?
Jason Robards. He can lay in a freaking bed and still make you go, that's fucking Jason Robards. He's still the great actor that he is. Laying in a bed for the entire film. And you're still drawn to him.
He's freaking amazing. Love his character.
I think we only have you left there, Ralph. Did you have as charismatic?
I hate to go with the easy Tom Cruise, man. Yeah.
All right, we all heard it, Tom Cruise, right?
Yeah, Tom Cruise. I would have to.
All right. Best scene. I have 5 nominees here, and you guys can add to any if you would like. First one up, I have Respect the Cock. Next, I have Donnie and the Bartender. Then I have Jim and Claudia, so in her apartment, not at their date. Then I have Stanley refuses to perform, which is him not going up for the end of what looks almost like a mixture of Jeopardy and Family Feud. And then Frank confronts Earl. is my final one. So what did I miss, or what do you think I should include yet?
I'm going to go with one that, after watching the movie years ago, it stuck with me as some amazing filmmaking by PTA, was the whole scene where Wise Up is playing by Aimee Mann, and every character is singing a line from the song. That, for me, I know some people hate that scene. Why are they singing the line? Everybody's singing at the same time. For me, that is the best scene for me. Outside of the storyline, this and that whole way he did that, and the way he shot it, because I saw behind the scenes thing how they did this. I love it. I love how and every line each character is singing is something that's going on with them. Jimmy's singing about there's a cure and he has cancer, right? Everybody's saying something that they're dealing with in the song. It's almost as if that song was written for, I wonder if it was written for that scene. I don't know. But that scene for me, I can see it over and over again. I love it. So that scene there, and I'll throw it in really quick, was Julianne Moore at the pharmacy. I know you guys don't like that, but for me, that was great.
How could you not have raining frogs?
Yeah.
Well, because it's a larger scene, and there's like 7 scenes within one, and it
Does
fine.
it beg the question, why does Paul Thomas Anderson hate frogs? Because it gets to the point with the raining and the splattering that it becomes funny with the frogs bouncing off. Like, there are certain bits which, like, yes, oof, dude, you seem to be getting a lot of fun out of throwing a lot of frogs at people. Like, where's your trauma?
Well,
I'm pretty sure they were all CGI, but okay.
Yeah, walking and stepping on them all.
Ugh. Well, when he starts to back up the car, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be interesting. Sound design.
Who's going to clean them up?
Well, that's the thing. Now, was it just like the San Fernando Valley, or was it like more extended? I mean, Exodus does refer to your country. So is it like the entire United States?
We'll never know.
That is true. So here are your nominees for Best Scene. Respect the Cock, Donnie and the Bartender, Pharmacy, Jim and Claudia, Stanley Refuses to Perform, Wise Up, Raining Frogs, and Frank Confronts Earl. Out of these, what is
I have one more. I'm so sorry, but I do want to put it in. I'm so sorry to interject. I think it's important, though. It's my favorite scene, which is, I'm not sure the character's name, played by April Grace. She's the interviewer with Frank. And it's the scene where when she tells him that she knows about his mother and what happened to his mother. That, for me, that's my favorite, because when you that's where it starts to, everything starts to change for Frank, and he puts the stone face up. Has the line, Frank, do you hear me? What are you doing? I'm quietly judging you. Whoa.
As the camera's moving in closer to them, I love it.
All right, so we'll add in Frank's interview into here. But out of these, what is the best scene?
Mine is Wise Up.
Mine's Frank Confronts. I remember multiple times. I mean, I had both extremes with my parents. My mother died of a heart attack suddenly, and my dad died of cancer. So, and I remember having those conversations where you're sitting there and they kind of barely understand what's going on, so.
Michael, what did you have as your best scene?
It's the beginning of Frank's unraveling, which is when he realizes that someone else knows the truth about his background. And that's when his whole personality starts to unravel, which I think is interesting. I love that.
I'm going to go with Respect the Cock as not only the best scene, but my favorite scene, just because it seems so prophetic to modern America and a certain class of men that feel left behind and might be encouraged to vote for one political figure over another. So, Dad, favorite scene?
Respect the Cock. I remember that whole thing, and I've been a long time Sunday New York Times reader and get a lot out of that. And I remember reading in there, about the whole Iron John movement in the book and all that, and men being men and being out in the woods, and that's what this is. That's what it's representing, that movement. And I'm going, this is the idea of masculinity. So to me, it just is comical that this is the idea that this is what a man should be.
Either of you, favorite scene?
I think I talked about it already, but the kiss between Jim and Claudia when she starts with her coming back from the bathroom, ends with them kissing, and again the zoom in, like as they go to kiss, it's like they're tripping on each other's. One is vulnerable than the other, and then the other one pays it back, and it's like this rally that goes back and forward, which ends in a beautiful kiss. And I got to be honest, there is a lot of heart in the movie, but I think that's perhaps one of the best things about it is John C. Reilly and Claudia. Is it just some romance, like real romance, really romantic, really gorgeous, really authentic, bit weird. Yeah, I love that.
At the end, where you actually see her smile, she breaks the fourth wall. She breaks the fourth wall, looks at the camera, and smiles at the viewer like a real genuine smile. That for me, it was like, wow, that's great. That is great.
I mean, the cut scenes between individual stories and how it kind of evolves each one of the interconnected stories, as well as the romantic angle. It felt very Love Actually to me, and you know how much I enjoy that film. Right, Michael?
It is a film that is enjoyed by many people, and it is irrefutably, Thomas, it is irrefutably a movie. That is what I'm going to say about
wow. A rigging endorsement.
Ralph, your favorite scene yet?
Really quick, Tom Cruise, of course, breaking down next to Jason Robards as he's, letting him have it verbally, just, all the years of pain and anger just coming out. And it's almost like after all that shit that he spews out, Tom Cruise is not the same. He wakes up the next morning, goes to the hospital to see Julianne Moore or something. But I feel like that is like the death of that guy that Tom Cruise was, and the rebirth of the birth of somebody else. And they even, I think Paul Thomas Anderson touches on that. We see the dog dead on the floor from eating some of that medication. So it's almost like there's that dog that's out of Tom Cruise, and he's now someone else. I don't know. There's a lot to look at there, but for me, that's a heavy scene. Heavy.
And so important for Earl because it's, again, as he says, dying wish, so boring, blah, blah, blah. But he gives that. He's able to give that to Frank at the end. And that, I mean, as much as perhaps he will still, before his last dying breath, will still think he probably hasn't done enough. To do that, that it will just peace before death. I think
One word we have not said tonight: closure. For me, that was closure for Earl and for Tom. Wow.
All right, most indelible moment. It's raining frogs. How could it be anything fucking else? I knew it was coming. It was the one thing that everybody tells you about this stupid movie. And yet, at the end, it's still like, what?
Yeah. I know for a fact that when there's a pivotal moment where everything changes, I'm going to say raining frogs. And 9 out of 10 people are going to look at me like I'm a fucking moron. What are you talking about?
Most people look at you that way to begin with, but that's beside the point.
Oh man.
I mean, to be honest, as much as I think that my mother might have connected with this film, until that moment, once the raining frog started happening, she would have been out. She would have hated this movie.
Yeah, see, for me, that's what filmmaking is all about. It's showing something that the audience is not expecting, right? Because we get so caught up watching these cliche movies that we know what's coming next, okay? We know how it's going to end. We know the arc and the third, we just know everything. And for me, watching this years ago, when I didn't know frogs were going to drop out of the sky the first time I saw this, freaking blew me away. So to get to see something like that you're not expecting, damn. I mean, I can't say anything else about Paul Thomas Anderson. That's freaking brilliant. Brilliant. Weird, but brilliant.
Well, that looks like a good spot for our second break. We will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our Master Greatest Movies of All Time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 217 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Tom Christopher, 84, American actor in One Life to Live, Loving, and Buck Rogers in the 25th Century.
Unfortunately, I'm not very familiar with Mr. Christopher, but I'm sure that he was a fine actor and definitely contributed well, and I'm sure he will be missed. But we take a moment of silence here to recognize him for his efforts and contributions with a moment of silence in his honor. Thank you. All right, let's go to Best Funniest Lines. Now, I must make an apology to start this Best Funniest Lines to one Mr. Andrew Corns, who made a request that Dana would read the Tame the Cock monologue. Unfortunately, he forgot about this and did not have time to practice and doesn't feel that he could adequately do a good job. So as his understudy, I will step in graciously here. So, Frank T.J. Mackey, respect the cock and tame the cunt. Tame it. Take it on head first with the skills that I will teach you at work and say, no, you will not control me. No, you will not take my soul. No, you will not win this game because it's a game, guys. You want to think it's not, huh? You want to think it's not? Go back to the schoolyard and you have that crush on big-titted Mary Jane. Respect the cock. You are embedding this thought. I am the one who's in charge. I am the one who says yes, no, now, here, because it's universal, man. It's evolutional. It's anthropological. It is biological. It is animal. We are men.
The delivery, and actually, from your performance, weirdly enough, it sparked this thought in me, which is, I know what you were saying earlier about his character, Frank, and Tom Cruise's performance being kind of a cornerstone of the movie, because up until that point, I'd never seen something like that. Like I said, I saw this in the early 2000s. I didn't know that there were men like that on TV that existed, and that was a thing. Like that was my first introduction to it. But now we've seen like a slew of them, haven't we? And we know what they are now, mainly due to Magnolia. But the thing that it just reminded me of, that whole line, is that the delivery is like something out of the Righteous Gemstones. It's evangelical, isn't it? It's just take the words out and replace them with Jesus, and it's yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. It sounded like a televangelist right on TV, you know. Just send us your money, send us your money. Oh.
It sounded a bit like Sam Kinison in his heyday.
Boston stand-up.
And Sam Kinison, Yep, because Sam Kinison started out as an evangelist. And so that's where I think that fits right within that sphere. You could just hear Sam Kinison as a bit saying that.
All right, who has the next line?
I like, this is crazy. When the frogs start dropping into the pool, we get a close-up on Philip Seymour Hoffman, and he just says, how are there frogs falling from the sky or something like that? I mean, his face is just like stunned, and he says that line. For me, I just thought that was hilarious. Are there frogs falling from the sky? Oh my God.
If we're talking about randomness, by the way, just thought crossed my mind. His name is Pharma, and how he passed.
Yeah, right? Wow.
Yeah.
There's a few actors in the film that we lost, him and Jimmy Gator. I just love his work too.
Philip Baker Hall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God. He's amazing.
Can I throw in an honorable mention just now that you've mentioned Philip Seymour Hoffman, because he does one of my favorite exchanges is when he's having to order Hustler and Playboy and the other magazine, and the lady on the end of the phone says, "Do you still want the peanut butter and the bread?" And he says, "Yes." It's the lack of context. It's the lack of context with lovely, which is perfect. But also, if you notice as well, when he makes a choice, Philip Seymour Hoffman, and that's why he was so absolutely incredible. He makes a physical choice when he's on the phone to that lady. If you notice, when he's not, his mouth is open the entire time. He just does this thing where he's kind of standing there with his mouth open, and it's just a little choice, but I loved it. Sorry, that's not the one I'm choosing. The one I'm choosing, and I'm so glad. Ralph again. I'm so glad you mentioned Alfred Molina at the start. It's not actually Alfred Molina's line. It's Avi, I think, which is his henchman or sidekick. When William H. Macy says about him needing oral surgery and having to get braces, and he says, "Donnie, you got hit by lightning up in Tahoe. I don't think you need braces." Don't add metal to your teeth. There's not many jokes in this movie. That one had me on the floor, though.
Or Tom Cruise walking in and telling Philip Seymour Hoffman, "Get those fucking dogs away from him. I'm going to drop kick him," or whatever. That was hilarious, yeah.
All right, Dad, I think you're up.
Jimmy Gator. The book says, we might be through with the past, but the past ain't through with us.
Yes.
All right, I've got Earl Partridge. I loved her so, and she knew what I did. She knew all the fucking stupid things I'd done, but the love was stronger than anything you can think of. The goddamn regret. Oh, and I'll die now. And I'll tell you what, the biggest regret of my life, I let my love go.
That was great. Wow, really quick. I wrote this down. I think Michael mentioned it earlier. I wrote it down because Earl Partridge, Jason Robards' character, says this. And I think that it's over other shots as we hear this. He says, "Don't let anyone ever say to you, you shouldn't regret anything. You regret what you fucking want. Use that regret for anything, any way you want. You can use it, okay?" That's freaking amazing. That line right there.
And there's one more. I'm so sorry, just to do one last honourable mention. And this one, I don't know if any of you guys have seen Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Fleabag, but this is a line that comes up in there, and I'm pretty certain she must have lifted it from this, which is, "I have so much love to give, I just don't know where to put it." If you want a line that just encapsulates the human condition, wow, right there.
Jim Curring. A lot of people think this is just a job you go to. Take a lunch hour. Job's over. Something like that. But it's a 24-hour deal. No two ways about it. And what most people don't see is just how hard it is to do the right thing. People think if you make a judgment call, there's a judgment on that. But that's not what I do. And that's not what should be done. I have to take everything and play it as it lays. Sometimes people need a little help. Sometimes people need to be forgiven. And sometimes they need to go to jail. And that is a very tricky thing on my part. Making that call. I mean, the law is the law. And heck, if I'm going to break it, you can forgive someone. Well, that's the tough part. What can we forgive? Tough part of the job. Tough part of walking down the street.
May I ask why you played it that way?
What?
John C. Reilly reads that really straight. It's like a narration portion.
I know.
And you read it much more dramatically.
Perhaps because it feels like that is life advice that people need to, like, that's life advice people would read like online, usually in a GIF, usually behind a sunset background or something like that. But like it's the best advice I've heard in a long time.
Let me put it this way. Okay, John C. Reilly read it in a very monotone fashion. People heard it the way I presented it.
I didn't, but okay.
He's not auditioning for Magnolia, right? So he's just reading the
That's
line,
true.
you know? And it was great.
All right, I have Guinevere. Come on, Frank, what are you doing? Frank T.J. Mackey. What am I doing? I'm quietly judging you.
It's the stone face with which he gives it, and then knowing what happens next, how when he goes back on stage, you guys will know about it. You know how sometimes when you're talking off the cuff, a lot of stand-ups and actors do this. They go into the flow state. They don't know what they're about to say. They just start talking, and he does this immediately after that scene. And you start to see him crumble. You start to see him crumble because he's just let go and he's doing the character. But inside, you're seeing everything's just starting to disintegrate. And it starts with that.
Who's up?
I'm out.
I don't have another line. I mean, I could read the whole script. That'd be all the lines.
I got like 5 or 6 more, so. All right, fine. I'll continue here. Frank T.J. Mackey. Don't go away, you fucking asshole. Don't go away. Don't go away, you fucking asshole. Don't go away. Don't go away, you fucking asshole. That's the best I can do without like actually crying.
It's not bad, dude. The one that triggered me the most in this movie was when we haven't talked a lot about Stanley and his fucking dad. Have we? Is it Michael Bowen who plays the dad? It does an incredible job because I wanted that when he says to Stanley, when we know what's happened, Stanley's wet himself, and he says to Stanley, he knows what's happened. The kid has just told him. He said he pissed his pants, so he jerks him round and he says, "Show me, stand up." Makes him stand up, shows him. He already knows what he's about to see, but then he says the most unforgivable line, which is, "Oh, for fuck's sake, Stanley, why would you do that?" And I just wanted to reach into the screen and twist that fucker's head off. Like, oh, you bastard, you fucker. Why would you say that to your child, you fucking prick? Sorry.
Well, along those lines, I have one here for you. And don't read too much into this one particularly, but Dad, you need to be nicer to me. I also have Claudia. I'll tell you everything and you tell me everything and maybe we can get through all the piss and shit and lies that kill other people.
Love that.
I also have Donnie. I'm sick and I'm in love. Thurston Howell. You seem the sort of person who confuses the two. This is my last one. Thurston Howell. It's dangerous to confuse children with angels.
See? He's just dropping bombs all the way through the movie. Henry Gibson wins this movie.
All right, let's go to the Stanley rubric then. First up is legacy. Legacy is a measure of the legacy of the film approximately 5 years after it was released. So roughly 2004 to today. What is the legacy of this film? We split the category 5 points and 5 points between 5 for the industry and 5 for the general audience. Now, Dad, usually you or I lead this off. Would you like to go first or second?
I'll go first. For our guests who love the film, I will apologize in advance because I have to be honest as to how I'm going to score this. Okay, legacy. Industry. I'm going with a 3. There is a group within cinephiles that love this film, especially directors and people involved within the industry that just love it. Okay. There are a lot of people who are critics, who are people who are involved in the industry who look at this as being, well, it tanked at the box office. It really didn't do much to advance anyone's careers. Cinephiles are going to go, oh, it was Jason Robards' last film. Other people are going to go, this is his last film. So I weigh more on that side. From the public, no one knows this film outside of people who are really in love with films and love Paul Thomas Anderson. Okay, I had not heard of this film until about 4 months ago. Okay, now admittedly, in 1999, I had a 9-year-old son, a 6-year-old daughter, and a 3-year-old daughter. And it was difficult for me to see a lot of films unless it was like Aladdin or such. So it fell within that kind of blinder spot for me. But still, I've talked with people, and a lot of people do not know this film. It's a shame, but I'm not sure there's a large group of people that would really love the film because it's provocative, it's artistic, it's thought-provoking. And when you can go and see car chases and explosions, why would you necessarily want to go here? So, public, I'm going with a 1, so I'm at a 4.
I'm going to respectfully disagree, Pop, that I think we give a little too much credit to the people who don't watch a lot of films in some of our scoring on Legacy. I wrote up a kind of rough rubric within the rubric months ago where I have industry listed as like revered by a small section of critics and directors, or 3 taught in film school. I think you would find it very difficult to find a lot of cinephiles who probably have not seen this movie. It's not like a truly deep cut because it's a fairly well-known director and it's the movie that he's the most proud of, even though most people refer to it as his most imperfect film. It is one that I think a lot of people probably watch before several of his other, what I would call deeper cuts. So like Punch Drunk Love. I think Magnolia, you're going to probably put that on before you'd put on Punch Drunk Love. Or even Inherent Vice. I think this is going to come up before Inherent Vice on most people's watch list. And so because of that, I have it roughly listed at like a 3.5 because it's somewhere between taught in film school and on the must-watch films of most critics and or like changed some industry practices. Like I don't think it completely changed industry practices, but I believe when we did the Love Actually episode like 3 years ago, that I gave it a little bit of credit for kind of inventing this weird rom-com trope where they did this kind of interweaving story, interconnectedness, and it birthed like all of those weird holiday rom-coms like Valentine's Day and Mother's Day and all these New Year's Eve. I think there was one that was also in there. But I want to say they just basically ripped off Magnolia and made it into a rom-com. And so I give this a little bit of credit there. So I have a 3.5 for the industry. On the public, though, to go back to where I was starting, if most of the film nerd community has seen it, or even half, it falls somewhere between a 2 and a 3 for me. So I have that at a 2.5, and I end up at a 6.
You make a good point on the industry, so I'll go up a half a point. So I'll go from my 4 to a 4.5.
I would agree broadly with strangely enough, with both, even though they're opposing points of what you've both just said, I think there's truth in both of them. I think one thing from the industry perspective in terms of legacy, although I don't know how positive this is that, as you've referenced, this is a director's movie, and this is a cinephile's movie. I think people have attempted to make this movie again many, many times, and I'm struggling to think of one that's better than this in terms of this format. I think there have been a lot of attempts. Does anyone remember Babel with Brad Pitt?
Oh yeah, the Inarritu
Crash.
film. Yeah.
Do you remember Crash? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's hard to forget Crash.
Traffic, Love Actually. I mean, this again, from an industry perspective, I think its legacy is that it is revered by the industry, but not necessarily well kind of replicated or adapted, which leaves me kind of in that mid space. So I think I'm just going to go a 2.5. I feel safest at a 2.5 because I think legacy from an industry perspective, yep, good, but from an audience perspective, when you look at it on the other side, we've seen a lot of shit versions of this movie since it came out, which isn't great. But I would lean much more, I think, towards perhaps Thomas's sensibility on those who have seen it and appreciate and know it for what it is. I think for those who get it, they get it. Again, though, and again to play both sides, I'd agree with Dana though as well. Though outside of that group, it's a hard draw, and it's a really hard draw. So I'm going 2.5 and 2.5 on both sides. I think, unfortunately, fives.
Fence sitter.
I love the film, right? So for me, it's a master class in filmmaking. It really is. I think it set the standard for that type of film, the structure, like Michael was saying. Other films have tried to do it and just failed. I think Paul Thomas Anderson could have been shorter. Yes. Like you said, 20 minutes shorter at least. For the industry, I'm going to give it a 4. Okay. I think let's say I'm a student at a film school and they showed this film to me in class. Wow. You know what I'm saying? And I went to film school. This wasn't around when I was in film school, but like I said, it's a masterclass in filmmaking. For anybody to come around and top this, it's going to be a hard thing to do. Public, I'm going to give it, it's going to be low. It's going to be like a 2, I think because I have young kids, teenagers, and they're so used to seeing things that are, like you said, fast moving, special effects. Their attention spans are not going to be able to take this 3-hour film, right? It's not a Marvel movie, right? So I don't think there's a place for it right now. Like, let's say it were to come out, at a theatrical release. I don't think it would do well. I think it would do worse than it did back when it came out. But for somebody to see it at home, on their TV, I think it's definitely a must. I think everyone should see it. If anyone loves movies as much as we all do, and if you're a movie fan, give yourself 3 hours and watch the movie for sure. So I guess I'm at a 4 and a 2, a 6.
All right, so that is a 5.38 average between the four of us. Impact and significance. Dad, you led off the last category, so I will start here for us. This is a category, again, that we split between the industry and the general audience. This is the impact and significance of the film in the immediate 5 years after its release. So roughly 1999 to 2004, what was the impact and significance of this movie? On an industry standpoint, I do think that it was a big swing by somebody who was getting a fairly large reputation. It was maybe the last real big swing by Tom Cruise. I know that, Michael, you said earlier, Tom Cruise tends to take a lot more big swings. I don't think Tom Cruise has taken a lot of big swings since about 2000. A lot of it's been the action films. He's just kind of become this defining action star. Let me run around, jump through stuff. Jack Reacher, Edge of Tomorrow. hang off the side of a building or a plane. That's what gets him energized. But it's not this kind of dramatic acting anymore. I think to a degree, this might have broken him going this deep.
Do you think perhaps, and I completely agree with what you're saying, but my outlook on this is I think Tom Cruise is doing that action, runny, jumpy, shooty, crashy thing because up until the point where he can't do it anymore, and I'm with him. Just get it done, fine, get it out of your system. I'm ready for the last part of Tom Cruise's career where he starts making choices like this again, where he starts doing interesting roles because he can't jump off a building anymore.
And I think it's coming because he's supposedly going to be the lead in the new Inarritu film. And then he had been rumored to be in Tarantino's scrapped script most recently. So I do think he is willing to take some chances and do some better parts, especially after he kind of got back in the good graces of everybody with how well Top Gun Maverick did. And it wasn't just, I'm going to do a Mission Impossible film every 3 years. No, I'm going to need to show up to the Oscars type of thing. And it's going to be a big question of whether I will. That type of stuff is going to be somewhat important going forward for him. And I do think from a legacy standpoint, he's got to kind of come back around. We're 20 years on from the couch, so it's time, Tom. But that being said, I think that the fact that this was, even as the 64th highest grossing film of the year, still considered for a few Oscars, didn't win any, but I think being significantly nominated, A, Tom Cruise, it's one of his few nominations, B, Paul Thomas Anderson getting nominated for screenplay leads him into the next several things. Eventually, I think that's when he hits it big with There Will Be Blood. And that's like his true arrival moment. So I think this is a 4 from the industry. I can't go much higher than that. And even then, it might be a little generous based on standards we've had in past episodes. But on an audience side, again, I have to kind of refer to the film bro kind of conversation. I don't think this is something that was seen by the general public. It was 64th worldwide. We already mentioned a bunch of films that finished well above it, and they are plenty. They were much more generally positive. They were things that people have probably seen a lot more often than Magnolia. But the fact that the film community still embraces this, as I think almost universally everybody says this is an imperfect Paul Thomas Anderson movie. But the way they still come out for it, I think says something. So I'm going to go with 3 on that. I have a 7. So not all that different from my 6, but all right, go ahead, Dad.
I agree with your comments on the industry. I'm not going to add a lot. I'm going to go right with your same 4, which is what I have. For the public, I'm going to go a little lower than you. I'm at a 2.5.
Okay.
And for the public, it's, again, this is a situation, this is a common theme where it's art versus mass consumption. It's the difference of when you go to a restaurant and you have the nouvelle cuisine, where it's the little pieces of food that are put on your plate, versus having really good food that's a large portion that, most Americans prefer. It's that problem with this film that why the public did not embrace it. You talk to people who are art or who love art, and they'll go, oh, I love Monet, or I love, occasionally you'll see Picasso, but then you talk, and then it's, how many people love Dali? Because it's just a little bit more avant-garde. And that's where this falls below. So I'm at a 2.5 for a 6.5 overall.
Ralph, would you like to go here?
Sure. I'm going to go with the public audience first. We'll go backwards here. I think it was a limited release, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think it was a wide release. And I think a lot of the audience might have been expecting maybe a little more of something in the Boogie Nights kind of vibe. You know what I'm saying? A little bit of tits and ass and all that stuff going on in Boogie Nights, Mark Wahlberg, all the, young stuff. I don't think people were really prepared to see something like this for his next outing. And I think it caught people off guard, which is why it landed number 64 on the list. I'm going to give that a 2.5 for the audience. Like I said earlier, I don't know if it would even make it in the top, 70 if it were released today. Industry, I'm right along with you on 4, or for both of you, on impact in the industry. I'm going to kind of echo what I said before, and I don't want to repeat myself, but I think it kind of ties into what I said earlier. Paul Thomas Anderson just basically setting a standard with this. And I think it's actually made a huge impact in the film world.
I would agree. I think industry-wise, it's almost a 4.5 for me. It's a high one because, as we said, even though in the year that it was up for Oscars, it didn't particularly do well. But I think, as we've covered, it clearly had a huge impact on those people, because then almost look at kind of Oscar-winning movies after that point. Kind of, that's the template they were going for. Like, that's what they were going for, even though perhaps it didn't win on its own. But so yes, from an industry standpoint, I'm going 4.5. I'm going high on the audience as well, and it's for one key reason. I'm going 4, and I think this sums it up. I think for those of us who saw it, for those of us who watched it and it connected with, I think there are a lot of cinephiles out there who didn't know that they were cinephiles until they watched this movie and they loved it. That makes sense?
Good point.
This is kind of the line in the sand for people. And for those who just perhaps it didn't connect at the time, like myself when I first saw it, didn't have perhaps the life experience for it to really connect with. But there was still something about me that, even though I didn't have the life experience, I knew this was a work of art. I knew it was a work of art. And going back and watching it 20 years later completely proves it again. So yeah, I think people make decisions about themselves and what they like based off of, oh shit, I must be a cinephile.
You hit it right on the head really quick. So I'll tell you really quick why I want to make movies and why I do. It's not for the fame and for the money. I want to reach that 12-year-old kid who was me sitting in the theater and somehow impact his life, right? And I think if Magnolia impacts even one person in that theater, where there might be 300 sitting, it's done its job. You know what I'm saying? We all, like I said earlier, we all see movies through different eyes, and yeah. So I want to throw that in. It's even if it reaches one person, then it's done what it's supposed to do in my eyes.
Like Thomas said, people will draw swords for this movie. People will go to bat for it. And Paul Thomas Anderson has a great filmography. He really does. But if you were to put a gun to someone's head and say, put a number of DVDs, Paul Thomas PTA DVDs out on the bed and say, choose the one you want to watch the most right now, I don't think most people go to There Will Be Blood, or I think there are a lot more people who would go to this before anything else.
When we get to it and me doing Daniel Plainview, then maybe I'll convert a few. But, all right. So that's a 7.13 average between the four of us. Novelty. This is a measurement of the originality of the concept of the idea, and that can be in many different forms. That can be from a technical aspect, that can be from a storytelling aspect, that can be from pretty much anything you want to make of it. It's kind of a unicorn factor. And then the execution on that idea. So we split this category as well, 5 and 5. I'll go first here again. I think this is actually a fairly high originality. I don't want to say that I think this is topped out at a 5, but given what we've already said about it creating a similar story structure that was reutilized a lot for about the next decade afterward, I have to give it a little bit of credit on that front just to start. And the fact that we've already said that it's the best executed probably of any of those as far as like a serious version, I also think that that's high. Yet, as we keep saying, it's an imperfect movie. So going back to the originality of the idea, I have a 4.5 for that. I think what might bump me up to a 5 is if somebody makes a really compelling argument that the frogs by themselves are worth like a full point. But I will go for a 3 on the execution. I just think that there are a few things that could stylistically make this a little bit different. New Line Cinema specifically said to PTA at the time, this may be the only time you get to do this. You have carte blanche to do whatever you want. And normally when we see filmmakers get that blank check, they create a movie that is so controversial. I think one of the ones that I heard somebody compare this to was Damien Chazelle's Babylon.
Oh,
It falls in a similar category where it's they get this ability to do a blank check and create a movie that is so controversial to people. Now, Dad, you and I loved Babylon.
Yes.
We had a very good, enjoyable experience in the theater watching that. But to other people, they can't stand that movie. Similarly, I think that this movie could have been cut down at least 20 minutes, if not probably a good, 40 minutes, probably.
Yes.
There are a couple of storylines in here that, from my personal vantage point, didn't need to be there. And for everybody, it's a little bit different. For some people, they didn't like the Jim and Claudia stuff. I actually thought that was a little bit compelling. Maybe not as much for me, Claudia, as it was for Jim, but I could have probably done without some of the Donnie Smith, but that ties into the Stanley category. And so you kind of have that dichotomy, young versus old, when it comes to that. So I don't know if you could have really cut out all of that. And then, I don't know, the Linda Partridge stuff, I don't really know overall how that connects to everything else in the movie. It feels kind of like an add-on. And as much as I've enjoyed Julianne Moore, I thought she dialed it up to 12 on this one a lot. So...
Boo.
Sorry, Ralph. I know you'll defend that to the end, but I know you'll defend that one to the end. But so I have a 7.5 on this one. I have a 4.5 for the originality and a 3 for the execution.
I want to jump in. So, really quick, Novelty. I have 4.5. Originality. Once again, going back to the Wise Up song, that whole little thing there. I don't think I've ever seen that in a film where you have the entire cast singing the same song wherever they are in the film. Execution, I have a 4.5 as well. I thought the opening, the first few minutes where we're seeing this old footage of, how coincidences happen. You see Patton Oswalt get scooped up in the lake, and that was freaking amazing, right? Why is this guy in a tree? And then we find out why. So I thought the execution was great. The little kid that's rapping, for me, that could have been cut. Yeah. Right? That whole little kid for me was not necessary. There are some deleted scenes, I understand, where we understand a little more about that little boy and his backstory. But for me, I was like, why is he even in this rapping? It just, I don't know. I could have lost that. I would have lost him before Julianne Moore, to be honest with you. But yeah, so I'm at a 4.5, solid. 9.
I'll help you guys here as well. I'm exactly the same as Ralph. 4.5 on both. I don't think there's anything more that I would add. I'm the same. Exactly the same. 9. 4.5 apiece.
All right. Go ahead, Dad.
All right. Originality. I have never seen a film that had so many personal concepts: pain, regret, loneliness, redemption, acceptance. Okay, I couldn't think of a film. So you want to give it a point or a point down or half a point down? I can't. I'm at a 5.
Woo!
Big guns.
It's purely original to me. I really cannot think of a film that comes across with as many concepts and does it in the way it does. Now, execution is a different story. For the average film fan, the introduction seemed like a kaleidoscope. I'm having a hard time digesting it. I actually, at one point, after we went through the introduction and the opening scenes and everything going on, I actually stopped it and went back and rewatched 10 minutes of it because I couldn't figure out where the hell it was going or what was going on. I understand it was brilliantly cut the second time I saw it, but for the average person that was. Not to mention the fact that it was too long. It should have been tighter. I'm not talking about removing scenes or concepts or storylines, but you could easily have cut 20 to 25, maybe even 30 minutes out of this film, made it much more tighter. Okay? So I have a problem with that. So I'm at a 3.5 because overall, the way it was shot, the techniques, the zooming, the pans, the angles, everything about it was so brilliantly done that I can't give it lower than that. But it needed to be edited. So I'm at a 3.5, so I'm at an 8.5 overall.
What about the shot of the frog? The first shot, you see the frog coming down to the skylight, and it hits Jimmy's hand and knocks the gun out of his hand. He was gonna. The camera just comes down, boom, and you see the frog hit his hand. He drops, oh man, saves his life. Well, for a little bit.
No, and it doesn't. That's not the point. And when we get to final questions, I've got a response to that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, Novelty then is an 8.5 average between the four of us. Classicness. Now, this is our most difficult category to define. Most times we start at a baseline of 7 and then move up or down based on a few different criteria. That's mostly because it's more difficult to push something up that it's aged well comparative to aging poorly. There are so many things in this day and age that we rip films apart for aging poorly on that it's easier to move down. So we started a higher baseline for this one and then move up or down. Dad, you usually start this category for us.
This was difficult for me. Okay? There's so much of this film that I find appealing. The flawed female characters, the flawed male characters, all that. But the pre-Me Too movement, Tom Cruise going, respect the cock, just does not age well at all. The only thing potentially work is if this would have been a Weinstein film.
Can I jump in on that? I fundamentally disagree. I fundamentally disagree because I think
I kind of do too.
The minute he says respect the cock, it's funny because it's ridiculous. I think our first reaction to him is, okay, this guy's a prick. I know exactly who this guy is. And I think the movie doesn't. I think it just puts him out there. I think it calls him as he is, a prick.
I understand your point, and I respect your point, but I still think that sometimes.
I also disagree with you, but it's for a different reason. I think that's actually aged well, not because it's the way in which we'd like the world to operate, but it's still telling of how the world is right now. You can't tell me there aren't a ton of people that would show up to a Tame the Cunt seminar right now. If you started handing out flyers in Nakusa, Wisconsin, how many people do you think would show up to the local fire department if it was for free to learn how to respect the cock?
Sign me up.
I know.
And so I don't think that I don't like the way that has gone, but I think that actually has aged well because it's telling of where society is.
And in a little bit, I think the Me Too thing is kind of going away or has gone away, right? It's not as intense as it was a few years ago. So like you said, I think today it works.
I don't think there's anything that you can criticize this movie for now that you couldn't criticize it for at the time. I think
True.
the criticisms of it in terms of an execution, I think, is absolutely right. They're all pretty horrible characters. There are only two really nice people in this movie, and that's Phil and Jim. And part of PTA's genius, I think, is painting characters warts and all, and showing kind of the true ugliness of humanity. It's interesting.
Jimmy Gator's wife and Claudia's mom is also a nice person.
Yeah,
true. Sorry.
Well, going back to the scoring aspect of the classicness. Okay, we started at 7. I went up and went back down because of that circumstance. So I came out at an 8. So I don't think I'm that far off from where things are. So may have been a little bit too much recrimination before I gave the score.
No, that's fine, because I'm only a half point different than you. I have an 8.5 because I don't think I kind of agree with Michael's sentiment that I don't think there's anything now that you can criticize the movie for that you couldn't criticize then. So I don't think, like, nuanced wise, we've really aged that differently. And I do think the film was a little bit ahead of its time on the telling of childhood trauma, on unearthing kind of these seedy Hollywood people that would apparently molest children.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to give credence to like Q here. That's not where I'm going. I know where some people would take that, but this is not what I'm saying. But I do think, and then on top of it, kind of this notion of the incel faction of the world, the country, etc. I think this ages actually pretty well for 25 years on. I'd be curious to see where it's at 5, 10, 15 years from now. But I think for right now, I think it ages pretty well. And it might, if it gives it another couple of years, get a little bit of extra like timelessness to add on to the classicness. So I have an 8.5.
I think, I mentioned earlier, I don't know if this movie would do good these days if it was re-released, but I think for the anniversary, isn't it coming up in December? Is this month the anniversary, right?
Yeah, so it's December 17th was the wide release.
They do so many re-releases of films like Interstellar and even Jaws a couple years ago came in. I would love to see a re-release of this, even a limited theatrical run, to see how it would be received by the audiences. Let's face it, it's a depressing movie. It's freaking depressing. I mean, I go to movies because I want to feel good, right? I want to come out, damn, Brody killed a shark, son of a bitch, right? The only uplifting part of this is when Claudia looks at the camera and smiles at the end. I mean, it's really a depressing piece of filmmaking, right? But I think it would stand up today if it was shown at a theater and the advertising was done right. I think people would go see it. I think it definitely holds up today. I give it like an 8.
Okay. I will just respectfully disagree. I was actually pretty hopeful coming out of the end of the movie.
Were you really?
So maybe I saw it differently than most, but
I was.
Because of the level of forgiveness.
Yeah, I see.
And catharsis that everybody went through, I found it somewhat hopeful. But maybe that's just
No, when I said it was a depressing movie, I didn't mean I came out of there feeling like I wanted to go hang myself or anything, but I
jump off a building and get shot by your mom accidentally.
But the whole Jason Robards thing and all that stuff, yeah. So it moved me different, I guess, than a lot of other people. But
Michael, I think you're the only one left.
I'll be quick. I agree. I think broadly with yourself and with Ralph. I would put this at a 9. I think if you neuralized the entire human race with Men in Black Cha-ching thing, and you re-release this movie at the next Oscars, I think it cleans up.
Woo, love it.
If people forget they ever saw it, and he re-released it tomorrow, I think it cleans up. 9.
Well, it went up against Gladiator, didn't it? I think, or something that year. So
no, it was American Beauty that year.
American Beauty, right? American Beauty.
Yeah, a real
which I will go to bat for that movie as well.
Talking of Me Too, Jesus.
Yeah, well, okay.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten to that one yet, but we will.
Yeah.
All right. So that is an 8.38 average between the four of us. Let's move to rewatchability. This is probably the most subjective category that we have. We have a lot of different tests that people have theorized over the years. You're welcome to use whatever you would like to come up with this. You just have to come up with a final number that's between 0 and 10. Ralph, I will let you lead on this one.
I have to be honest with you. When I knew I was going to do this podcast, I rewatched it. I rewatched it again, and I rewatched it again. And I've gone back to look at different scenes over and over, and I could watch this thing again and again. So a 10 for me. Now, is this my
This is your 10.
opinion? Okay, yeah, my 10.
Yeah, you're fine.
I would do 11.
Well, I mean, they're all
'cause I
your
love
opinion,
movies.
but
Yeah.
we try
This
and
is
be
an
a little
audience.
more.
It's my thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's more subjective than the other categories where we try and be a little more objective.
Yeah, definitely a 10. 10 plus.
All right, Michael.
I think on one side, this is a hard movie to sell to, I don't know, a friend. I'm going to say a friend. I'm not going to say like a partner because I think just a friend coming over, do you want to watch a movie? I think, as Dana pointed out, I think there are a lot of other choices that when you sit down with a friend, you're going to choose over this. I think from a personal perspective, the reason why I'm here is because I'd seen this movie once, and just the very potential of getting to watch it again and do a deep dive on it was huge for me. So I'm kind of, it's a 2 on one side, which is I wouldn't put it high on rewatchability, if I'm honest, on a general perspective. But from a personal perspective, it does have a kick. It really does have a draw to it. So I'm going for a 7. Yeah, 7 combined. Yeah.
When I finished the film, I had one perspective. Then a day later, I had a different perspective. Then when I'm preparing my notes, I have another perspective. And after having gone through this show, I have yet a fourth perspective. Originally, I'm like, okay, I'm not sure I get everything, but I'm not sure how much I want to rewatch it. Then I'm like, maybe if I rewatch it, there's more here than I anticipated. Then it's like, is this an onion that the more layers I start peeling away,
It's a Magnolia.
the more I'm going to get to it, the middle. And now after going again, I'm going, not only am I going to want to watch it again and kind of feel like I'm going to get more out of it, I'm going to like to convince somebody else to watch it and watch their reaction and see how they behave. Because Tom's mom, my wife, is the everyman in our show, which is she's an intelligent, bright, dynamic woman, whatever, but she also is not really
Artsy inclined.
Yeah. Okay. And so I have half a mind to say, you really need to watch this film and just have her watch it and just see her reaction. Because
I'm telling you, the minute she sees the first frog fall from the sky, she's going to be like, what the fuck is this? And that moment alone will turn her off for the entire rest of the movie.
But Thomas, she'll be 2 hours deep.
Okay.
She's 2 hours deep at least. I mean, when you're committed.
Yeah,
It
true.
won't matter. The tiniest things in movies could just turn her off immediately. And
I know.
she's done.
So, but to that extent, I'm at a 7, which is a very high number generally for me for rewatchability, because I reserve the highest ranks for a cadre of films that I generally want to rewatch.
Like Love Actually.
I watch it about once a year. Yeah.
There you go.
About this time of year. So, Dad, funny enough, I also have a 7. This is just something that the longer I've sat with it, the more I'm intrigued to go back in probably a couple of months when I've let it kind of sit and linger and revisit and see how I feel about it then. because the longer I've had separation from it, the more I've discussed it, the more it just continues to intrigue and just kind of claw at the back of my brain. I'm at a 7 as well. So that means we're at a 8.25 average between the four of us. For audience score on this one, we had a 70% for Google users and an 89% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us a final score of 7.75. So to repeat the categories, we had a 5.38 for legacy, we had a 7.13 for impact and significance, we had an 8.5 for novelty, we had an 8.38 for classicness, we had a 8.25 for rewatchability, and an audience score of 7.75, giving us a final total of 45.39, and currently placing it on our list. Don't worry, Michael, it'll be above Love Actually. Just between 12 Years a Slave and Monty Python and the Holy Grail for number 127.
What company? That's a juxtaposition in terms of neighbors, isn't it?
Every week,
that's our show.
Every week we have weird.
Oh man!
I mean, I should just read a random section. Okay, we'll do this as an exercise. Anyone give me a range of numbers 5 or 1 through 5 numbers anywhere between 1 and 217.
124.
124. So we'll start there. Okay, number 124 on the list is Seven Samurai, followed by Spotlight, 12 Years a Slave, then this movie now, and then Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Wow.
That's the purpose of the show. We're trying to figure out how you match up various genres and put them together.
Do you want to throw out another 5 numbers just to see?
77.
Okay, we'll try 77 here. All right, okay. Number 77 is Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, followed by Batman Begins, Parasite, Sunset Boulevard, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Wow. Sunset Boulevard and Ferris Bueller's Day. Wow.
Okay, so, and Dad, you said 54?
53.
53. 53 is The Big Lebowski, followed by Aliens, Get Out, The Sixth Sense, and Singing in the Rain.
Wow.
There you go. It's awesome. Yep.
So, all right. As usual, if you disagree with any of our scores, you can write us at greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on any of our socials at GMotePodcast, and we do accept DMs. Or you can find us on our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMotePodcast. Let's move to remaining questions on this one. Does Jimmy Gator burn to death in his house?
I'll answer.
I figured you would.
Okay. Shooting yourself is the easy way out. He had to burn in hell. That's the purpose of this. He was trying to take the easy way out. The Fargs intervened and said, no, you have to suffer for what you've done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think anybody's going to answer that better than that, so let's just move on.
I agree.
We've kind of already answered this one, but what is the significance of the frogs? I'll just refer you to earlier in the show with Dana. 3, does Jim try to save Claudia?
I think he's trying to save himself, too. You know, not just Claudia. I think he's saving himself and her.
Isn't ultimately that what we do?
Yeah.
If we're trying to save somebody else, we're really trying to save some aspect or part of ourselves.
Hence the song Save Me that Aimee Mann sings, right? It's called Save Me at the end. That kind of ties into it. I don't know what he's saying on the bed when he's sitting down at the end because the music kicks in. I'm going to look at the script and see if I can get those words because he's saying something.
I thought it was scripture, to be honest, but okay.
I don't know. I'm gonna try to find that out.
Do the kids continue their streak on the game show?
Who the fuck cares? I mean, we've had how many kids shows where we're just exploiting children because they look cute or sound funny? You know? I mean, who cares?
Well, we know who's not smarter than a fifth grader.
Luis Guzman?
Sure, that's where I was going. And finally, does Linda survive, and what would be her relationship with Frank?
Oh, interesting.
That's one of the. I know we talked at the beginning about what this movie's about, and I did say hope, and I think hope applies to quite a few of the characters, but I think that's the one where there's a. I'd be interested to know where that story goes, how those two then connect with each other, because she's volatile and he's in the process of almost shedding his skin from a character perspective. Like
Yes.
I would be highly intrigued to see what happened there next.
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
I think ultimately she's going to cling to him as the metamorphosis of her husband, and he's going to cling to her as the last thing he loved.
Wow.
I mean, the easy answer to this one is that she'll respect his cock and she will tame her cunt.
Should we just end it there? Just end it there. End it there.
Yes.
All right, that's fine.
I try to leave on an upbeat note, and you went to the basement.
Comes in like a wrecking ball.
You taught me well.
Yeah, I guess.
All right. I want to thank our guests for being with us this time, and we'll reverse order from the last time. But Michael, where can people find your work, and what are you working on?
You can find me on YouTube and on Twitter and on Blue Sky at Skadoosh. Or if you Google movie ranking, you will find me eventually. Yeah, I am working on more movie rankings. I'm writing some bits and pieces at the moment. I have a script myself, which I'm kind of ticking over. And it's been an absolute pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And you were working on a movie ranking this evening.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I like the nerdy side of movie journalism. I think everyone likes to talk about their feelings and artistic style and stuff. I like this stuff. I like when you actually break stuff down, break it down, and actually look at why and how does it compare. This is nirvana for me. So yeah, once again, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Well said.
And Ralph, what are you working on, and where can people find you?
Yeah, so can I drop a few names really quick? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first project I'm going to shoot it's called Killer Date, and it was written and going to be directed by a talented guy named Carlos De Leon. The book that I optioned, I'll say the name of the book. There's no problem with that. It's called The Exorcist House. Scarier than shit. I mean, it's a really good book. I read it and couldn't sleep the first night. I kid you not. It's really an intense book, and that was written by a great author, Nick Roberts, and adapted to screenplay by my buddy Dane Larson, and that will go into production in June. We got a great director attached, and yeah, you'll be hearing more on that, I'm sure, if you follow me on Instagram.
Sounds good.
Yes.
Dad, I don't really have too many remaining thoughts. I don't think you do either, but I'll just say one quick thing. We have one of the rare opportunities next week. We do not have a guest on. It is just the two of us.
Just the two of us.
Yes.
We haven't done one of those in 6 months.
Yeah, I know.
What film?
I know.
What film?
In the Heat of the Night.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
there you go.
a true buddy film.
How appropriate.
I mean, you could say it's a father-son-ish
Yeah, okay.
kind of movie.
Anyway, no, it looks like my wife will be cookie baking with my daughters up in the Twin Cities. You and I will be home alone with our 3 dogs. And
Oh, no, I'm going to have this edit to keep me company.
oh, okay. Well, we may actually be able to get out and see a film that the two of us will enjoy and Mom will not.
I'm not sure about that. I think that it's enough of a mainstream movie. A Real Pain is what we're talking about. That Mom might even like that.
Well, all right.
I suggest rewatching Magnolia.
Yeah, well, I'll guarantee Magnolia did not play in my town. I will guarantee it.
That is probably true. Even in 1999, it was going to be difficult.
Yeah. Anyway, but yes, that's all I have. So looking forward to the holiday. I am anxious for Christmas. I spent an entire day driving down to Madison from Wisconsin Rapids. If anybody wants to look at a map to assist you with regards to some business, and listen to Christmas music the whole way there and the whole way back. I'm anxious.
Dana, very quickly, top 3 Christmas songs.
Just because of the irony, White Christmas, the Christmas song,
yep,
and Holly Jolly Christmas. The first 2 simply because they're written by Jews.
No.
Yeah, okay. This is the part of the show where we have to suddenly cut. So thank you all for listening.
Yeah, I don't want to get canceled.
Thank you all very much for listening. We'll see you next week. They call me Mr. Tips. Next week for our 242nd episode, we revisit another film from Season 1 to close out Season 5 with In the Heat of the Night from 1967. Directed by Norman Jewison, written by Sterling Silliphant, music by Quincy Jones, starring Sidney Poitier, Rod Steiger, Warren Oates, and Lee Grant. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in on our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at GreatestOldTimeMoviePodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GModePodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our technical provider and distributor is Captivate FM.